Alright, so continuation on 66b. So we said that since the latter part had to do with Hazah, so presumably the upper part also had to do with Hazah. Gemara says, Midi'iri, that are the cases comparable? Hakadei Iso, Hakadei Iso. What's appropriate in one is appropriate in one, what's appropriate in the other is appropriate in the other. Rashi says, Kochad v'chado b'madeh ha v'shinu l'gabei Mairi, Risha de Mairi v'shinu ma'aseh, the Reisha could be dealing with change in procedure, that the Maliko, a person is cutting two simanim instead of one. Seifa, the Maisa de Maliko, Lahove Shinoi. The Seifa, changing location to the above the Chut HaSikra, it's irrelevant for Maliko, so then to Tukim Bahazah, you have to say, you're talking about that he did Hazah above. Oilas ha'oif chule, once you have oilas ha'oif, so it says if it's done according to the procedure of a chatz la'oif, it's disqualified. The shani b'mai, what is it that he did different? So ilemo the shani b'meliko. If you want to say the meliko did only cutting one simon, mektani seifa. Since it says in the seifa, kulan ein metamin bebeis hablio, it says in the seifa everybody is kulan moalin bohen. Everybody gets meilo if they use any of these birds. Also and it also applies if a person does a ma'aseh chatos, this oilas oif k'ma'aseh chatos Hashem chatos. And we say in kulan ein metamin bebeis habliya, and they're all chayav me'ilo. Umalim boyan neima delok Rabbi Yeshua. It seems to go not like Rabbi Yeshua. Rashi says the iu amar ein moalim bohen b'masnisin. He says in the Mishnah that you're not moalim. In other words, he's going to say, we're going to see that if a person takes ois oif and they completely handle it like a chatas oif, then it becomes a chatas oif and it's not meila to use it. The kohen can eat it presumably. So, but here in our Mishnah it says that it's all moalin. So apparently, we're talking about a case that you can't say it has to be not like Rabbi Shua. The Rabbi Shua, the Amar Ein Malin, because he would say by Ein Malin, in the case, at least in the case where if the action that you did to treat the Oif like a Chatzaif would be that you did only cutting one simon, at least in that case. Okay? So Ve'ela B'mitzui. So what is it that you did? Because if you did only one simon, then Rabbi Shua would say, it's not mali, it's already a chatas, became a chatas. But if it's only mitzui that changed, Rashi says, Ube'olo pliga Rabbi Shua. There Rabbi Shua doesn't argue. If you took the oilas ha'oif and you did mitzui, or you had changed the mitzui in a way that's like the chatz ha'oif, that doesn't turn it into a chatz ha'oif. So therefore, you could say it's even going like Rabbi Shua, and it would be moalin. Says Rashi, "Ubeholo pliga Rabbi Shua the tamo the Rav Ado the Amar hoyo Rabbi Shua oilas oif she'os lamato k'ma'aseh chatos Hashem chatos nimshach misham oile v'nasis chatos. If you do it below, it becomes a chatos oif. V'hoi tamo leiko lemeimar elo kadeshoni b'meliko. That only makes sense when you shoni b'meliko means that you cut one simon instead of two. The first of Ashi lekoma mishum the oil tzricha shtei simonim v'chatos kashera b'simon echad meliko oilas ha'oif lemato leiso zeh shemolko lemato u'leshem chatos b'simon rishon hishlim bo kol ma'aseh chatos. So once you go and you're doing it below the Chut HaSikra, which is like a chatos, and on top of it you do the only one simon, it becomes a chatos. Lefikach yotza bo b'shem oilo v'nasis chatos v'havi chatos ha'oif she'os lamato k'ma'aseh chatos v'shem chatos she'en bo me'ilo aval leichot b'meliko l'shoni. But if you cut two simanim not one, molko lemalo, and he did the meliko above the Chut HaSikra, u'k'ma'aseh oilo, like if it was an oilo, su lo nimshechas v'shinui. Then you don't say that Sula nimsheches b'shinui demitzui Shelo mitzvah. So then the mere fact that you didn't do mitzvah, which is the normal required, at least by an ola it's required, just because you skip that doesn't turn it into a chatos. Elohizo kedin chatos, lemato lemewe chatos ha'oif. But rather, instead, you say you didn't do mitzvah, but you did hazah lemato. That's not going to be sufficient to turn into chasav, just because you decide to do hazah lemato instead of mitzvah lemalo. So, therefore, if you don't do the Rashi is saying, if you take it according to Rishua, if you take an oilas ha'oif and you do a melika of one, if you do melika above the chut sikra, and you cut one, if you do the melika, if you cut the one siman below the chut sikra, then it transforms it into. There's doing the melika and only cutting one siman, you're doing it below the chut sikra, transforms the ola into a chatas. But other than that, it doesn't transform. And if it transforms, then Rabbi Yeshua will say there's no me'ilah. If it does not transform, you're still doing a change that will create a psul, but not a transformation into chatas. And therefore, that's the way we have to understand the mission. If you want to say it reads even according to Rabbi Yeshua, which is the pashtus. So it's only b'mitzui that you made a change, meaning you left out the mitzui of required of an ola, and you did the hazah instead below the chut sikra. But that is not going to transform it into chatas. It's just going to be a psul, and therefore it's going to be me'ilah. Aim if it's used. Aim or seifa. Look at the seifa. It says oilas oif sha'aso lemato k'maiseh chatos. If you did an oilas oif lemato, you did it below the chut sikra, like a ma'aseh chatos, l'shem chatos. Rabbi Eliezer oimer mo'alim ba, Rabbi Yeshua oimer ein mo'alim ba. So there in the Seifa, you see a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says there's no me'ilah when you did it. Some change that you made, we're talking about in the Seifa, of other sorts that you did, like a ma'aseh chatos below. So what is it that you did that caused Rabbi Yeshua to say is no me'ilah now? Tishonim mai. If you want to say all he did is mitzui, that he abandoned the mitzui and he did hazah below, but when it comes to melika, he did it above and he did it both simanim, like an oila. Emadam Rabbi Yeshua, you think that's what Rabbi Yeshua said? Tishonim melika. In other words, no. The only place where Rabbi Yeshua said that it's going to transform the ola into chatas, and therefore he would say en malin, that's only by melika, but he never said it by mitzui, that you abandoned the mitzui and just did hazah below. That would not transform it. So therefore, we have to say that this case, where it says that Rabbi Yeshua is disagreeing with Rabbi Eliezer and saying that in fact en malin ba, it has to be a case in the Seifa where it was done, where the melika was changed and was done only one siman. Ve'elo b'melika. So rather, this final clause must be referring to change with regards to the pinching. Okay, reisha v'seifa b'melika. But then we're saying that the reisha, if this is the seifa, we're saying is melika, and the reisha we're saying is also melika. Or at least we said that it could be melika. And if it is melika, then that was a shinui between the oila and the chatas, and therefore is not going like Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon, which is fine, because although it's something we learned already before, but it could be that that's what it's telling you. That in a previous mission we learned it, but it could be here it's continuing to tell you that it's not like Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon. Okay, we had another choice. We didn't have to say the ratio that way, but that was a possibility. Umetziyosa b'mitzui, and we said that the middle case was b'mitzui, where the change was not such that it would transform the oila soif into the chata soif, because in the middle case we said that it seemed that everybody was agreeing that there was going to be me'ilah, so therefore we didn't want it to be a case. We wanted to say that even Rabbi Shua would agree. That would mean that the change was mitzui. They took the oil, so if you abandoned the mitzui and did hazah below, but the melika still was Melika of Oilas Oif of 2 Simanim. So therefore the change in the middle case was Mitsui, and the change in the upper case and the bottom case is Meliko. Okay, so that's what the Gemara is saying, and the Gemara is wondering that maybe that's doesn't seem to make sense to have that type of disjointed organization. The Gemara says, nothing wrong with that. Reisha is safe for Meliko, Umitziyoso b'Mitzui. The top and the bottom are talking about Meliko, and the middle case is talking about Mitzui. All right, Mishnah. V'kulan emetamin bebeis hablio. So it says, so it says, and all of the offerings enumerated in the previous Mishnah, even those that are disqualified and may not be eaten or sacrificed, still differ from carcasses of unslaughtered kosher birds in that they do not render one who swallows their meat ritually impure when the meat is in their throat. Kulan ein metamin bebeis habliya umolin bohen, and there is me'ilah. Okay, the reason why it's not metamin is because the pinching of the neck is like a shchita. But nevertheless, since they are forbidden to the priest, one who derives, in other words, if there's a psul, the priest cannot eat it, so one who derives benefit from it is going to get me'ilah, except for the bird of the sin offering. Except for the case of a chatas ha'oif that was done below, like the procedure of a chatos and for the sake of a chatos. What is that? Rash says, even by chatos, which is to be eaten by the Kohen, you get me'ilah, because now they became possible, these cases. There was no time for him to be matir to Kohen, because we're talking about cases where there was a psul. So they remain me'ilah subjects. Except for chatos oif she'asu lemata k'maisa chatos l'shem chatos. The kshero hi v'yesh lo shas heter lekohanim v'shuv ein bo me'ilah filazar. But if you have a case of a chatos oif that was done properly, which is edible to kohanim, so since it's edible to kohanim, even for a day or two, whatever it is, a day and a night, that already takes it out of the category of me'ilah, and therefore even if a zar, a non-kohen, eats it, it does not get me'ilah. Weiter. The case of a bird burnt offering that was improperly sacrificed below the red line, according to the procedure of the sin offering, so Rabbi Eliezer says, Malin ba. You can get me'ilah by it. The oilohi, umi, it's because it's an ola, just done wrongly. Umi otziami me'ilah, so no one takes it out of being an ola. Shas hater, and there's no shas hater. It's never mutter to eat to kohanim. And even the kohanim couldn't even eat an ola, and they don't eat this. That was possible. There's nothing to it. However, Rabbi Yeshua Imer ein malin ba. Rabbi Yeshua said, we said before, apparently we're talking about a case where you made a change by an oila and you shachted through the backs of Malika only one siman, and you did the Malika below the Chotasikra. So Rabbi Yeshua Imer ein malin. The key one, the Shino Shma, the name changed. Maaseh mekoimo l'shem chatos nasis chatos can the Farish Begamara. Right to the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer said, Uma im chatos she'ein mo'alin ba lishma k'sheshino eshma mo'alin ba. If you look, this is the argument. If you take a chatos, and a chatos you cannot be moil on it, normal one, because it's edible to the kohanim. But when you change she'ein mo'alin ba lishma, but when you change it, you do it l'shem another carbon, it becomes pasul. So therefore, it's never hater. Then you can get me'ilah. The Rabbi Yeshua Gufel poligale. Nobody argues with that point. Okay. Oila, however, oila shemualin bolishma, even when it's done all properly, and oila is subject to me'ilah because it's not edible by anybody. K'shashino ishma when you change its name, Eino Din Shimolu Ba, you treat it like a chatas, still, it should remain to be an ola. It should remain to be subject to me'ilah. Okay? So if something is chatas, that is not naturally subject to me'ilah when it's done properly, if you change its name, it becomes subject to me'ilah. So something that's already subject to me'ilah and oila, you try to change its name, for sure it should remain a me'ilah subject. That's the argument of Rabbi Eliezer. Amar lo Rabbi Shua said, "Lo, I disagree. Im amad bechatos sheshino ishma l'shem oila." If you want to say by a chatos, you change its name to make it like an oila. So then what? Sheken shino ishma l'davar sheyesh ba meila. You change it from something that was not subject to meila to something that is subject to meila. So there, okay, I'll agree that it's subject to meila. So you changed it for the worse. But toimer be'oila sheshino ishma l'shem chatas. You're going to tell me that therefore the same answer should be for something that was an ola that changed its name to become a chatas. Sheken shino ishma l'davar she'ema meila. It changed its name towards something that's not subject to meila, because chatas is not subject to meila. So that should be treated differently. Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer answered him, Varei kodshei kodshim sheshachtan b'daram v'shachtan l'shem kodshim kalim yochichu. I can bring you an argument if you take kodshim that were shechted in the south of the by the altar, but they're supposed to be shechted by the north, but they're shechted by the south. Yishachna l'shem kodshim kalim, and a person had in mind they're shechted them for the sake of kodshim kalim. Yochichu, I bring a case from there. Sheken shino ishmam l'davar she'em ba meila. You change its mind to something that is not subject to meila. So at least if the kodshim was an oila, let's say, so and you make it into kodshim kalim, you're teaching it to something there's no meila. Shekodshim kalim ein boed meila ela be'imurin. Like Rashi says, only the imurin, but the rest is edible, or mostly. Umoalin bohen, and then it becomes meila. It went from kodshim to kodshim kalim, becomes meila. It's subject to meila. It was subject to meila anyways, but it continues to be subject to meila. Afata al al ha'oila, so don't be surprised by an ola. Afal pi sheshina shma l'davar she'em ba meila shimalu ba. If you change it to something that the chatas oif that's not meila, still it remains more meila subject. Because why is it meila? When you take a kodshim, you shecht it in the south, that apostles it. V'lo hevi oson zrikoson l'chlal shas heter. The sprinkling of blood doesn't make it mutter at all. L'otzia midei meila, remains meila. Amar Rishua answered him, "Lo, it's not true. Im Amar b'kodshim, I understand by kodshim shachtan b'darm, you shecht in the south, shachtan Hashem kodshim kalim, even though you have in mind for kodshim kalim, sheken shina ishmam l'davar sheyesh bo isur v'heter." So you're changing it for something that has a side of isur and a side of heter. Isur because emurim yesh bo in meila, because the kodshim kalim, the emurim are subject to meila. Chatas ha'oiv kula heter. And if you have a chatas ha'oif, it's completely mutter. So there is some kodshim kalim aspect, some is mutter, and then some is not mutter. Sheken shino shmam l'davar sheyesh bo isur v'heter. You have different mixture of things. Toimar be'oila, but can you say same thing by oila? Sheshino ishma l'davar shekula heter. You change an oilas oif to a bird chatas ha'oif, which is completely edible by the kohanim. So that should be treated differently than going from kodshim to kodshim kalim. So therefore, I don't agree with your argument, Rabbi Shua will say. He's saying, thank you very much.